Welcome, friends, to Radicalized, where truth survives, and you know we got your back. I'm Heidi Cuda. I'm here with my friends Jim Stewartson, High Fidelity, and Sean Connor, my favorite superheroes exposing the disinformation highway. We have an incredible show for you, and we have a little bit of breaking news. Do we want to just start with Frontloaded, gentlemen?
Sure.
Let's do it. Let's
Yeah,
do it.
let's do it.
Frontloaded.
Yes, we want to tip our viewers off to the fact that Radicalized Truth Survives is doing its very first special presentation. So look for that in the next day or two. We had some breaking news. We are so blessed to have had Nadine Smith join us from Equality, Florida. She's going to show you the authoritarian capture that's being attempted by Ron Benito DeSantis in her beautiful state of Florida. And she's also going to explain exactly why they may wish they hadn't picked this fight and show all the good work that the young people are doing down there to fight against this, ridiculous bill that was just signed. And in fact, Connor, do we have the title of that website that she's going to refer our viewers to? Because I think we should already start hyping it.
Yes, we do. It is, and I'll put it in the show notes, but it's
Great.
free to say gay.org.
That's right.
Yep.
So we have an incredible special presentation coming up. Be on the lookout for that. And that is my quick hit on Frontloaded. And again, Nadine, we got your back, okay? And so do our viewers. All right. So, hi-fi, do we have a word phrase of the week?
We do. And our word phrase of the week this week is cybernetics. Ooh, sounds techie, right? There's a lot that goes into cybernetics. It's a huge field. It's a regulatory systems, purposive systems. But the thing I want our viewers to understand the most about cybernetics is that it's a feedback loop. And Sean, could you pull up a picture of a cybernetic feedback loop for me?
Sure can, buddy. 1 second. Here we go. It's like this.
There you go. A cybernetic loop. And the reason this is important, the reason I want our viewers to understand this, is because the algorithms that we engage with in social media, not just social media, but all media, but specifically social media, is a cybernetic loop. Data is being collected on the users. The algorithm does some action. The user responds. The algorithm takes that response data, adds it in, and keeps feeding you stuff. And I think the most important part of the cybernetic loop is in Jim's documentary, he creates a Trump fan 1776 account and gets sucked in by the algorithm, a cybernetic loop.
Wow.
Yeah, it was quite an experience. It took me 15 minutes, starting with 0, and the loop, and that's exactly what it was, grabbed me immediately. I took the word praying in, and it gave me a QAnon account, and I was like, "Oh, that's interesting," and I hit follow, and then I hit follow, loop-de-loop-de-loop-de-loop. And every time I followed, the little loop would keep going, and a bunch of people would follow me back. I'm like, whoa, that was exciting. Now I want to do that again. And so I follow some more people by hitting the same button, loop-de-loop-de-loop, and more people follow me back. Keep getting more and more of this. And in the meantime, all around me is fascist, racist, angry, brutal propaganda to indoctrinate you into a fascist cult. But at the meantime, the cybernetic loop is just sucking you in, loop-de-loop-de-loop. So,
And
cybernetics is definitely an important concept. It can be applied to many things, including governments, lots of other, fields, but a very important word to at least get the idea.
And Hi-Fi, can you explain how this could have affected voting outcomes, particularly as we look at what happened in 2016 with the Hillary Clinton basically manufactured narratives.
Yeah, probably the most important one was based on data that Brad Parscale had and that they admitted to using to disenfranchise African American Facebook voters from voting for Hillary Clinton. This is a very important. This is such an important topic. I actually went and did a whiteboard about it. Sean, could you pull up the whiteboard for me?
Yeah, 1 second.
Our super
really-
Ukrainian Sean.
I want people to go out and do a little reading on cybernetics.
Yep.
And this was brought to my attention by some technology friends of mine. As you see at the top, we have the cybernetic loop, right? We have the data collection, the action, what happens to the end user, reaction, feedback, have another action. But the bottom part is really, really important because it just went white. It describes all the different fields that make up cybernetics. There's a huge science behind this. There's data science behind this. And it is actually such an important field in Russia, interestingly, that a cybernetics specialist named Andrei Ryabinsky actually was set to have a meeting in Trump Tower with Donald Trump. So you have to wonder why the Russians have such a great interest in cybernetics.
Well, this gives me a fantastic opportunity to preview our upcoming guest, Nancy MacLean, author of Democracy in Chains. Boy, oh boy, we're going to sink our teeth into this one. But she did note that part of the Koch machinery that we are all experiencing when we talk about authoritarian capture and fifth column in America, they particularly honed in on data. So we are going to have a fascinating conversation with her about that. And also, I do believe that our very smart viewers have to read Democracy in Chains, Nancy MacLean's book, in order to see the missing pieces that will really explain how this fifth column developed. So thank you for that hi-fi. And now let's jump into, yes, sir.
Real quick before, I forgot to drop this in chat, but I wanted to let you know there's in looking, cybernetics is a huge field as we've discussed. There's something called the cybernetics of conformity, which is coming out now, and it's basically the fear that the algorithmic conformity is going to keep all of our decision making in such a narrow field of view that our sort of our critical thinking skills are going to atrophy and deteriorate, so that there is going to eventually be this, as we've discussed before, an algocracy or an algorithmically driven narrowing of our choice into sort of what they call a cybernetic conformity.
Wow, thank you for that, Sean. Awareness is everything, and that's very much why we do this show. So, all right, so can we just jump into why it matters?
Why does it matter? Why does it matter? By High Fidelity.
All right, why it matters this week. Our first story, America atrophies. And this is a story that came from the Atlantic, and it talks about the population decline in the United States. And obviously there are three ways that population is affected. That is through immigration, deaths, and births. In 2021, the United States had the lowest population growth of the last decade. And there's a number of reasons for this. Immigration, one need only look at the increasingly hostile Christian nationalism of the right in the United States to understand why immigrants are being turned into objects of fear and scorn by the right. And as for births, the free market capitalism that so many on the right espouse has actually turned into an environment where it is incredibly difficult and incredibly expensive and sometimes incredibly dangerous for people to have children. And it's very important to the right that they continue to have bodies for their capitalist machine, I suppose you'd say. And that has a lot to do with their focus on abortion. They don't want women's rights, and they need to have bodies that are thrown into their machine for it to function.
Okay.
Why this is so important. If you look at the difference between two CEOs, one is an individual named Dan Price. He is the CEO of Gravity Payments in Seattle, Washington. He raised the minimum pay for everyone in his company to $70,000. And what happened after that, although it is anecdotal, it's still data. More people were happier with their lives. More people bought homes. More people had children. As a society, they thrived, right? And then you contrast that to Palantir co-founder Joseph Lonsdale's rant about only losers would take paid paternal leave. You see the harsh differences between the two mindsets, between the left and the right.
Thank you for that. I think it's going to be very exciting to talk about some of this stuff with Nancy MacLean, but I do want to just point out one victory for the working man, and that is Amazon unionizing. So there is traction happening there. So wherever we show some of this, really important stuff, we also want to show some of the good things that are happening. So I take
not
that
just
as a win.
Amazon, but Starbucks is a growing national movement of unionization of Starbucks stores across the country. Unions are important. They protect working people.
It's going to be very interesting to see what the pushback is. Part of Nancy MacLean's book talks about how what was happening when Scott Walker was in Wisconsin was not even something that originated in his state when he was trying to push back against unions. And so this is part of a concerted attack on the working class in America, and we're going to be exposing a lot of it on our show.
It's part of the reason that we haven't had a significant, pay wage increase since the 70s.
Yeah. Yes, that's right. Well, again,
I also think it's important to point out that Palantir is all about turning people into numbers, right? So that they can be weaponized, which is why a guy like, Joe Lonsdale, who is the founder of it, would, have that point of view. There are also, he's also, along with his friend Peter Thiel, they don't think that, certain people should get college educations, because it's just a waste really on them, right?
Yeah.
It's the same bullshit that, these guys have been, this class warfare stuff, sort of concealed as libertarianism. It's
right.
It's bullshit.
That's absolutely right. Excellent. Concealed. I love that. Oh man, you can see I'm like salivating to get to Nancy's interview so we can talk about all this stuff. That's amazing. Okay, so now I think we have to issue a trigger warning. Is that correct?
That is correct. Our next story does speak about sextortion, which was our word phrase of the week a few weeks back, and it also deals with suicide. So this story is about a young man named Jordan DeMay. And Jordan DeMay was catfished on Twitter through DMs and cajoled into sending what is colloquially known as a dick pic. He was then extorted for money and told that if he did not come up with the money, this intimate picture of him would be sent to everyone in his school, friends, relatives, etc. Jordan got some of the money in the hopes that it would stop. Once he paid the first time, there were further extortion demands. And not knowing how to deal with this, Jordan took his own life. Why this matters. Sorry, this is very personal for me. I have a relative who the same situation happened to. He did not commit suicide as quickly as Jordan did. Instead, he drank himself to death. these social media companies are a metastasized cancer on the whole globe. They are harming children. They are harming people. They are weaponized against people. They're used for scams. They are used for accusations, smears. That's why this story matters.
Yeah.
Let me just say something. First of all, thank you for sharing that, Hi-Fi. I know that was really hard. A lot of the people out there want this. Unfortunately, there are groups of trolls who specialize in trying to make these situations happen, to basically troll people into suicide, including some of the people who are attacking us.
We've seen this in Gamergate, is that right, Jim? One of the initial stories that I heard about was the Gamergate pressure.
Yeah. Well, Gamergate there were all kinds of tactics that were employed on people, right? They swatted people by sending, cops with guns drawn to their house.
Yeah.
They did all kinds of things. And yeah, the goal was to tear an individual down as much as possible, regardless of the facts or the truth, for the sport of it.
And here, it's also, I think, important, Jim. I know we've mentioned this in the past, but the physical mapping of the brain, there is no difference between physical pain and a public shame and then humiliation. In the brain, it is identical to physical pain. So when someone goes through this public shaming or this public embarrassment, it physically is identical to the physical pain.
Reminding me of
There's direct, physical pain, emotional pain, psychological pain occurring on these platforms for these individuals, particularly younger individuals who may not be fully, developed cognitively. So you can imagine that pain, that difficulty is quadrupled, right? It's exponentially more difficult because they don't have the facilities or vehicles or understanding to know how to possibly remove themselves from the situation. It's horrifying. It's absolutely.
When I was trolled in 2018, online and offline, I used to talk to my son on FaceTime, and the look of agony in my face as I was trying to tell him I was okay, like I would see just how much emotional pain and turmoil I was in, and I had no framework for it like we do now.
Right.
Now we have a framework, and we have a show dedicated to exposing this shit. And Hi-Fi, I just want to tell you two things. One, I love you, man. For reals. And two, the social media companies, which have done an incredible job connecting the world, are also clearly handmaidens to authoritarianism and harming the world. And they need some fucking regulation yesterday. And thank God people like Dr. Charles Krill are working on that. And so thank you for that. Yes, we have a third story here.
And our third story actually kind of fits nicely with what you just said, because our third story is Soviet silicon and WAPO waffles. And this story was a story in the Washington Post, and it was titled, "From Russia with Money, Silicon Valley Distances Itself from Oligarchs." And it was a commentary on a woman known as Putin's Kiss, Masha Drakova. And we've discussed her previously on the show with Craig Unger. But what people don't understand is this is a puff piece. This is wool being pulled over your eyes. They do not discuss Masha Drakova's long history with Yuri Milner, who is basically a sanctioned Russian oligarch, Uzmanov, basically his bag man. He took all of Uzmanov's money into Silicon Valley, spent it on Facebook, spent it on Twitter, spread it around, Yuri Milner was also associated with the Edge Foundation, which was also patronized by Jeffrey Epstein.
Mm-hmm.
We know that one of the things Epstein did was to compromise individuals, normally through the use of human trafficking.
Also,
if you think-
Founders Fund and Y
Founders
Combinator.
Fund. Y
Yeah.
Combinator, yes. Actually, Yuri Milner and Peter Thiel both worked for Y Combinator.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Y Combinator, in case people don't know, has birthed a shitload of startups
Tech-
and a very, very interestingly successful lineup of startups that magically suddenly make it to unicorn status and
Right.
amazing numbers. Which anytime you see a financial company or instrument that is overperforming the market by very large percentages, you should look on that with suspicion.
Absolutely.
That's
And anytime.
Or any financial companies that could be abused
Yes.
and utilized for money laundering.
And can we also talk about media treason? Because I think any of the media outlets that are being used to, put these puff pieces out, I went a little bit bananas over the last couple of days because the BBC put out a Maria Butina puff piece. They allowed her to spew all kinds of propaganda about Putin's annihilation of Ukraine. They did not mention that she was a Russian spy. They literally gave her, her title, her political title, and then just gave her a platform to parrot Putin's talking points in Russian propaganda. So we here on this show will continue to hold the media to account. We will continue to hold social media to account. And I thank you for that incredible, brilliant and
Was that
brave
on
White Matters.
like the Sean Hannity of BBC or something? Like
I don't know. I don't know because I haven't had
because
television in 16 years.
no rational show or news would do
No, I don't
that.
think so. I think Charles Creel said it was actually on something called Hard Walk. He said it was on something that I thought that they should do better because Charles Creel reposted my story. And either he was being ironic or he said what, WTF. So
But two things
really?
about Maria Butina. She seduced Patrick Byrne, who is currently working with Mike Flynn and doing the whole QAnon live routine.
Yes.
And she also worked with Oliver North and Wayne
Yes.
LaPierre to
Yes.
launder a ton of money through the
Yeah.
NRA for Russia.
Yeah.
So
BBC didn't
you'd
mention
think-
any of that. Yeah. They
Funny,
didn't mention
funny,
any of that.
funny that.
And she's got lots of cozy pictures with lots of right-wing politicians. I'm just
They were
saying.
the low-hanging fruit. Yes. When we talked to Nancy MacLean, please do not let me forget to mention that she referred to this Koch-funded fifth column back in 2017 when this book was out. She has been talking about this stuff for some time. So once again,
That's right.
Heidi drooling. You know why? Because we love our historians on this show. I say it every time. We love our history professors.
And we love they're good writers. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. Okay, so we got some brief legal briefs, Sean. Thank you again, Hi-Fi. That was brilliant.
Brief legal briefs.
Brief legal briefs.
There we go. Really brief. No, this is a follow-up to a case that we've been following for a while. Basically, the challenge to Marjorie Taylor Greene and Madison Cawthorn using 14.3 as a way to keep them off the ballot.
Yes.
So they, in the earlier one with the Madison Cawthorn, as we saw, the judge threw it out because of the redistricting maps, as well as because Madison Cawthorn switched districts that he's running in. Marjorie Taylor Greene has held. They have a hearing on April 13th, which I'm excited about. As well, she has countersued now these attorneys that work this up, and we will find out on the 13th what the judge has to say. But as we'll get to in Digital Dissent, I reached out to these attorneys and gave them some information that I had researched and recovered on Marjorie Taylor Greene
Great.
to see if they wanted to supplement their complaint. Heard back from them, which was nice. And so we'll continue to follow that as
And to be clear, they are saying she should not be allowed to run for Congress because she's an insurrectionist who tried to overthrow the government.
That's right. 14.3 states that you're not eligible to run for Congress if you have been engaged in any efforts to overthrow the government of the United States and any insurrectionist or rebellious behavior.
Should be basic. And my only concern, again,
Yeah, this is an easy case.
Yes, I've got Democracy in Chains on the brain right now, of course, because I've been reading it, as have you guys. But as we note, if you capture the courts, you can capture our country. So we'll see what that judge is all about. But thank you for that. So now I think we're going to be getting right to our friend Jim Stewartson's Hellscape.
Jim Stewartson's Hellscape. Oh, fuck.
Hey, y'all. So this week, I want to talk about a couple things. First of all, my friend Dr. Stephen Hassan posted a tweet that was really important, that I think shed some light on some items of serious national security importance, not to mention historical importance. Ginny Thomas, Clarence Thomas's wife, who is by all appearances a true believer, who was texting with Mark Meadows, dozens of times on January 6th, and helped fund the whole thing, is married to Clarence Thomas, and by all appearances is basically his handler and just more or less tells him what to do. At a minimum, they appear to have the same politics. So none of that is particularly remarkable, other than the fact that we have a complete right-wing, nut job sitting on the Supreme Court. But it turns out that she also has a history as a cult member in a cult called LifeSpring. Now, when I was, 17 or something, a friend of mine dragged me to a LifeSpring recruiting event. She was like, "Hey, come to this thing, it's fun, it'll be great." I was like, "All right, sure, whatever." And I went. It was fucking horrible. It was, they stuck you in this room for like 3 hours, and a dude is yelling at you about how you need to fix your life and all this shit, and just all these hardcore pressure tactics. And then they take you to this other room, and there's like 500 people in there, and they're chanting about how fucking happy they are, but like in a very scary way. So that was my experience with LifeSpring. So she got out of LifeSpring, and here's some video, if you have it, Sean, that Dr. Stephen Hassan, cult expert on Twitter, you should follow him, played.
I think another issue that maybe hasn't been discussed is when you come away from a cult, you have to find a balance in your life as far as getting involved with fighting the cult or exposing it. And kind of the other angle is getting a sense of yourself. I mean, what was it that made you get into that group, and what open questions are there that still need to be answered? And I think I'm struggling with a balance between that. I want to expose LifeSpring. I want to keep other people from going through that experience. But I also don't want to go overboard in that regard, so that I'm not, so that I can reconnect with my own needs and in a spiritual way, which I still haven't done. I still have so many questions, and I still have so many things that I want to talk to about with other people and find people who believe as I do and who are searching as I do. And so all those things that got me to Lifespring are still there. And I guess I struggle with not going overboard and fighting the cults, but I know that's important too.
So
Thank you, that was great. I just wanted to say that
Ah,
that's him. So that's
Stephen's
Dr.
so
Stephen
young.
Hassan.
Oh my God.
You
How
Yeah.
know,
young is he?
Jenny
You
was
want,
so pretty, and he said she was so sweet, you know?
you want to keep playing it to the end?
Yeah, go ahead.
No. Oh, okay.
one comment was that when, as you were saying, when former members come out, part of you wants to help others, but part of you needs to take care of yourself.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that was in an event that Dr. Hassan, at the time, Mr. Hassan, uh, 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 was holding for cult members, and Jenny Thomas was speaking, I thought, in a very empathetic sounding, very normal kind of way for someone who is coming out of a cult. Now, what's fascinating and heartbreaking, honestly, is Dr. Hassan says that the people who deprogrammed her, meaning the people who were able to, extract her and who were supposed to help her find her own way out, apparently had right-wing slash fascist inclinations themselves and effectively reprogrammed her. That's my word. But when somebody is in that state where they've been broken down so thoroughly, where they've been traumatized so much, they are in a very, very vulnerable state. And it may well be that Ginny Thomas was taken from one cult and basically put into another and then weaponized for now, 35 years? So I think there's a lot to be learned both in general about undue influence and how it works, but also if this person is actually a cult member, and she's been a cult member before and certainly has every appearance of being one now. I mean, she's as far out there as it gets. I think her proximity to 1/9 of the Supreme Court is extremely fucking relevant
Thank
and
you.
needs to be handled in a very serious way, because the Supreme Court is not supposed to be run by cult members, as far as I can tell. Maybe I don't think that's an amendment or anything, but it seems like you're not supposed to do that.
Well,
Hi-Fi, were you going to say something?
Sorry.
Go ahead, Sean.
No, I was just shocked as well to find out that there was no ethics policy for the
Yeah.
Supreme Court, right?
Right.
One of those things that you never really think about. You consider, you assume that it's obviously there, but I
Right.
mean, how baffling was that to find out that
We have all these vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
It's interesting in Nancy MacLean's book, Clarence Thomas is among the people of the right who saw this extreme radical right destroying our institutions, and he went on the record to say it. So what
Yeah.
happened between that guy and what we're seeing presently is of grave concern.
Yep.
Hi-Fi, do you have
Cool.
a point before he moves on?
Actually, the only point I have to make here is that the next play in this little Supreme Court game is really going to be up to Supreme Court Justice John Roberts. If he understands that Clarence Thomas is ethically compromised, he needs to run the court the way the Chief Justice should and make sure that Thomas recuses himself from all of these cases. If John Roberts does not make Clarence Thomas recuse himself, then I think it's pretty obvious what side John Roberts is on as well.
Well, going back to Nancy MacLean's book, Democracy in Chains, there's a very good evidence that John Roberts is also captured by a lot of the issues that we are facing. So we have
Look, the court's 6-3. We just have to fucking deal with it and either expand it or
Yeah.
start get rid of the fucking 3 judges that Trump
We're
put in
appointed
there
by
illegally.
inauthentic. Yes,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah, the
Thank
fake
you.
Okay,
president
let's
appointing
move on.
fake
Let's move on.
justices.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Okay, so next, I have two videos, and both of them are of my good friend, my old friend, Joseph J. Flynn,
That's right.
brother of the worst
Friend.
traitor in American history, Michael T. Flynn. The first video is of Joe Flynn absolutely stumble fucking himself all over the place trying to explain Satangate, trying to explain the video that I found of his brother doing a doomsday cult prayer in a Christian church.
There you go.
So this guy is going to ask him about the 7 rays, and that's what that is.
Here we go.
Let's get to the 7 rays of light thing. You're a Catholic, and that's the first thing that a lot of the Christian patriots saw, and we're like, what the hell is this all about? Because the 7 rays of light, from what I've been told, is a Mason prayer.
Mighty I am present. I am here, O God, and I am the instrument of those 7-fold rays and archangels.
We are your instrument of those 7-fold rays and all your archangels. All of them.
All of them.
So
I don't know what kind of prayer it is, to be honest with you. We're Catholics, and I think, and I don't really know where Mike got it. He says he got it on the back of his St. Michael's card.
And I will not retreat. I will take my stand. I will not fear to speak, and I will be the instrument of God's will, whatever it is.
We will not retreat. We will stand our ground. We will not fear to speak. We will be the instrument of your will, whatever it is.
I don't know. I never really confronted my brother about it. He's not an occultist, he's not a Satanist, and he's not a Freemason.
Here I am, so help me God, in the name of Archangel Michael and his legions. I am freeborn, and I shall remain freeborn, and I shall not be enslaved by any foe within or without.
In your name and the name of your legions, we are freeborn, and we shall remain freeborn, and we shall not be enslaved by any foe, within or without. So help me God.
Michael Flynn's not a Freemason.
No, we're not a Freemason. We're Catholics.
Okay.
The Catholic Church does not allow people to be Freemasons. Look it up.
100%.
My question is why?
Yeah.
Why? That's my question. What's the purpose of this? I mean, is this the Spanish Inquisition or something like that?
No.
I mean,
Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition.
Oh, Jim, you really messed with their mojo, man.
I mean, every single deflection, distraction you can imagine. It's not a Mason prayer. No, nobody fucking said it was a Masonic prayer, you idiot.
Yeah.
It's a doomsday cult prayer by
Yeah.
a cult called Church Universal and Triumphant,
Yep.
which was a spawned from the I Am cult, which is a theosophy cult that came up at the same time as the American Nazi Party.
Yep.
Anyway, moving on. Let's go to the next one real quick, and then
Yep.
we will end it off here. So this one is also Joe Flynn confessing to something different. This is about
You
his
just
brother.
can't
you know this, I have another brother who's.
Sorry, you ready?
Oh, yeah.
Let's go. Let's
All
go.
right.
I don't know if you know this, I have another brother who's an active duty 4-star general today.
Is it? I've heard of him.
Yeah, Charlie is the commander of USAR PAC, United States Army Pacific.
That's right. Yeah, and he's still right now. He's
He's in Hawaii, runs 90,000 troops.
How come Biden hasn't gotten rid of him? You would think Biden would want to.
Good question. It's a good question. We were definitely worried about that, but Charlie's the best guy for the job. He's got a lot of experience in Asian areas. Prior to this current job, he was the commander of the 25th year military guys.
Charles Flynn, Sidney Powell, and Iran Contra guy, Jack Singlove.
Jack Singlove.
Is their nickname. out in
This is a
Hawaii. So he
QAnon
was
cult conference.
spent a lot of time
At
in
the same
Hawaii.
conference,
And
there's
had
Mike
built a
Flynn
lot
and
of
Jordan
deep
Sather.
relationships with the militaries and the secretaries of defense of our allies in Asia. So he has a lot of relationships there. Then he was back in Washington as basically the COO over the Army under Trump. He was the number 2, the head of operations for the U.S. Army, and then got his 4th star literally the day that Mike was pardoned. And then got his 4th star literally the day that Mike was pardoned.
What?
Oh,
And they didn't. They kept
wow.
him in the job. You know. So
Yeah.
it is what it is. I don't know if you know that.
Wow.
Unmitigated liars.
Yeah, so that was the head of the National Guard who was ready to fucking roll all day long on 1/6 and was prevented by all of Mike Flynn's people.
Charlie
all
Flynn.
of Mike Flynn's people. Chris Miller, Ezra Cohen Wadnick, Anthony Tata, Kash Patel, and that fucking guy.
And then here's the incriminating part. Is initially when the reports came out about the phone call, the National Guard and everything, the Army lied.
They did.
About Charles Flynn being in the
under
room.
Biden. Under Biden. And
Joe, handle your DOD.
Came out, which is why they called them unmitigated liars and Stalinist propagandists, is because they fucking lied under Biden. That's the scary part. And I want to point out one last thing, and then we'll move on to our guest, who I can't wait for.
Yep.
If China attacks Taiwan, and the United States has to do something about it, and the right wing is pushing hard to make that happen.
Yep.
Guess who responds? Guess what army responds? The U.S. Army Pacific, under the command of the brother of the worst traitor in American history, Mike Flynn, who got his 4th star the day Mike Flynn was pardoned for his crime of being a traitor. So
that doesn't
welcome
make
to
me
Hellscape.
Feel safe.
When we talk about the 5th column in America, should we be concerned that somebody like Charles Flynn, and we know that we have a Manchurian candidate infection going on, as Craig Unger taught us, but should we be gravely concerned that he is in charge of 90,000 troops when his brother is a traitor and clearly? And when are we going to do what we were told to do by Martin Shaw last week, which is use the GOP's, Putin support against them? When are we going to see that happen?
It's somehow controversial to make that fucking argument still. And the reason is because the left has been psyoped to not talk about Russia for fucking 6 years. We got to get over it.
We're going to mainstream the hell out of it. Nancy is here. Oh my gosh.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Switch this around here.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for that Hellscape. And Nancy MacLean is here.
Yay.
Thank you so much for joining our show and our team. We are called Truth Survives because we really do believe truth needs to survive. And I absolutely love your Messino print or whatever you have going on there. It's beautiful. So this show, you may not know, we are a huge fan of history professors, authors, scholars. We rely on you guys like you have no idea. And we also, just to give you a quick introduction to the team, we have Hi-Fi, Jim Stewartson, Sean Connor. These guys are all incredible open source research investigators. This show was born out of the desperate need to expose disinformation. And so... and we are all friends of Dave Troy. And Dave Troy, ever since I've known him, which is a couple years now, has said, you must talk to Nancy MacLean. You must read her book, Democracy and Change. Well, as you can see, the steam is still coming out of my ears.
Your message is very funny today.
Because, well, the book is so important. And the missing link, well, first of all, I just want you to tell people what it's like to be an academic archivist rat who stumbled upon some footnotes which led you to this brilliant book and the importance of footnotes.
Thank you. Well, yes, yes. So I am, yes, it's what they call an academic, an archive rat. And that just means like you get on the trail and you have to keep following the trail and you just keep pulling and pulling and pulling. And so you do very strange things like studying all these footnotes and finding this stuff and trying to find the archives. And so, yes, so for this book, Democracy in Chains, well, there are a couple of footnotes which turned out to be really important. One of them was to a 1959 publication of a new center at the University of Virginia, which was intervening in the massive resistance to Brown versus Board of Education on the side of the segregationists in the language of economics. Another footnote that proved important for this work was finding that the same figure who did the 1959 report helping out the segregationists with the language of economics was also more important than Milton Friedman and the so-called Chicago Boys in shaping the Pinochet Constitution, that the so-called Constitution of Liberty that the dictatorship imposed, and that some 20 some people just lost their lives a few years ago fighting against. And now there's a referendum finally after so many years to alter that constitution. But anyway, so I had gotten intrigued with this figure, James McGill Buchanan, and started following those notes and then reading his work. And then I learned that there was an archive of his papers at George Mason University that only one person who's, like a sane, good person, like the kind of person you'd have on, had ever been able to get access to those papers. And so I contacted her, and long story short, I got into these papers that were just astonishing, that pulled that story through from the 1950s alliance with Virginia's most oligarchic rulers who were trying to preserve school segregation as well as deny labor rights, fight the New Deal, everything else, connected that all the way fast forward to Charles Koch and the donor network he'd built up, who was funding this guy in his final years. So it was really quite a revelatory story. And
You're
a lot of time
amazing.
to
You're amazing. You're amazing. I just want to say that
have a good
so do we. So we're kind of like it too, like I haven't slept in 6 years. I'm always just up in the middle of the night researching. And I do want to say that for our viewers to understand the high concept here, you have exposed the missing link to the right's plan to save capitalism from democracy permanently. And that is what we are seeing play out. It's astonishing to me that this Koch network of which you speak hires 3 times more people than the government GOP members. It's astonishing to me that pinnacle of socialism, Arlen Specter, LOL, referred to these people as cannibals.
Yeah.
There's so many things that you expose in this book, but can we please talk about that through line of how this far right, this radical right, this cadre that you speak of is trying to save capitalism from democracy?
Yeah. Thank you for that. It's really, it was frankly breathtaking for me to find all the pieces of this and, confirm them again and again, but that's exactly what's happened. And it put me in the very odd position for a historian of writing a book that a lot of people said, whoa, that was pretty prescient about what's happened, in the years since the book came out, where we've just seen an acceleration of what I wrote about in Democracy in Chains. But absolutely, that through line is really, and I have these guys saying it essentially in their own words, like they know that this, radical right, billionaire, multimillionaire donor network agenda is not popular with the people. If people understood what this was about and where it was going and what these guys actually want, things like the privatization of Social Security and Medicare, the privatization of public education, the end of regulation. I mean, we could just go on. It is so far right, and ultimately changing the Constitution to lock in all that so that we can't, once we realize we've been had, we can't go back and change it. So it is incredibly radical and incredibly disturbing. But yes, they recognized again and again, Charles Koch said things like, since we are, what did he say? Since we are, I haven't said this in a while, since we are a permanent minority, I believe is the quote. Our failure to use our superior technology, medical technology, guarantees failure. So it is breathtaking, and I'm glad that you appreciate the. It's just shocking, right?
It's everything. Dave Troy was absolutely 100% correct. The fact that they have executed a covert strategy. I look at the stealth that you write about as this incredibly disruptive stealth. The opening quote that you chose to open the book with still gives me chills. The public choice revolution rings the death knell of the political we. And why that's so important is we also have this incredible pandemic of selfishness going on, and this economic liberty that they all are screaming about that they want. Give it to them, but then deny them emergency services, deny them all their government tax breaks. I mean, I'm sorry, but I am, your book is very important, very profound, and also got my blood boiling.
Heidi, thank you for that phrase. I like that, a pandemic of selfishness, because it's also important for people to understand that these are the same folks who are behind our inability to get the pandemic under control in the Trump era, and then continuing into the Biden era. So, if you look at vaccination rates now, the parts of the country that voted for Biden, the most biggest gap pro Biden are almost totally vaccinated, right?
Right. Yes.
They're much safer than other parts of the country. Whereas if you live in the Trump belt, you're 4 times more likely to die of COVID now than you would be in, a blue Biden state. And that is not by accident. That is the cause that I'm writing about that has pushed out the systematic disinformation for years through Fox News and other forms of disinformation, including, and we'll come back to this, I'm sure, climate science disinformation, which is close to their hearts. They also were doing, as you say, the pandemic of selfishness. It was the Koch network funded like the litigation against governors to deny them emergency powers to ensure the public health. They were involved in all of those protests against masks that made it very, very hard for political actors to do the right thing. So they've just, they fund these crazy organizations that have been going to the school boards too, and mobbing essentially school boards.
Everything we report on, they are behind. We are finding it. And I know you use the term fifth column reluctantly, but you were accurate. This is a fifth column assault on democratic governance.
That's right. In fact, Nancy, that's how Heidi and I ended up meeting was through some research that I was doing into the anti-vax community, which then became, the put together by the CNP and by those doctors that have been sort of coordinated and mashed together for the America's Frontline Doctors.
Yes, the White Coat Summit.
Sort of digging my way through that, teaming up with Heidi and doing a report on some of the telehealth manipulation and fraud that had occurred through the COVID time period. And it was quite extensive and quite well funded,
That's right.
Very interesting. Yeah.
I just wanted to say that healthcare as a weaponized healthcare, right? Go back to the Tea Party, right? What was that? It was against Obamacare. It was against the whole idea of public healthcare in any form whatsoever, to the extent that they created basically a prototype of what we're seeing now, with many of the same people. Hallie Alexander, a lot of these people are holdovers from the Tea Party.
Yeah, now
I think that's important to recognize too, that Tea Party connection. And also you mentioned the Center for National Policy. And I think that
Yes.
into two dimensions of this that your audience really, I'm sure, would want to know about. And that is the way that although Charles Koch and the kind of tighter network of strategists that he has worked with over the years and the thinkers that he have funded, many of them were anti-clerical, very secular, including the man I wrote about in Democracy in Chains, James McGill Buchanan, whose ideas they weaponize to achieve the power that they have. But they have known for decades now that they could never achieve this radical transformation unless they find voters, right? They need blocks of voters to get them there. And so they have relied very heavily on the religious right, and particularly white evangelical Protestants who have kind of flown into, slid into Christian nationalism. And so they fund a lot of the key organizations in that orbit, and are involved, as you say, in the Council for National Policy. And also with the Tea Party, they were perfectly happy to weaponize the racist response to America's first Black president to capitalize on the energy that they produce to move their political agenda, which includes denying the rest of us health care, among many other things.
And
That's absolutely right. Yes.
Speaking of healthcare, in the weaponization of that, we find now the continued privatization of healthcare, and specifically in the ER, right? I think I read a statistic that 40% of ERs now are run by privatized third-party groups, which is a horrible environment for doctors to work in that pressure cooker, because it's the most profitable sector of the hospital, and they're driven to turn them over quicker and quicker and quicker. And it's now a numbers game for these capitalists. Just the finding new ways to monetize healthcare is a frightening situation for us to find ourselves in.
That's right.
You're right, Sean. And another thing, that we've seen through this is, and it's, what kind of cause would let its own members be killed off? The people who votes it relies on, but that's exactly what's happened here, because, the Republican Party now is overwhelmingly, more rural and small town, et cetera. And those are the places that are getting hit hardest by rising hospital costs. So we've had in North Carolina, hospitals in rural communities that have had to shut because they didn't pass Medicaid expansion, and the hospitals, became unviable. And that's happening in other places where these hospitals that serve a predominantly Republican patient base are unable to function, and nurses are fleeing the profession because they can't take, the numbers of COVID patients who have come in. There's people who have conditions, cancer, heart disease, other kinds of needs, who have not been able to get the care they need because the hospitals were overwhelmed by COVID patients who are disinformed by this radical right cause. So it's really tragic. And I have to say, as a U.S. historian, I don't know, and somebody who studied world history, I don't know of any other cause that would do that to its own people.
It was when my initial research was looking into this as a potential False Claims Act case, right? Because there's so much fraud going on, and there's so much theft, basically. It didn't turn out to end up rising to that level. There's too much public information, but it was fascinating to see the different mechanisms in play and the profitability. 800-900% of these online pharmacies marking up ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine just through the roof. And these were individuals that were fulfilling these prescriptions for America's frontline doctors. 800-900% above what they would get at their normal pharmacy. And these guys had already been convicted and were guilty of False Claims Act cases 15 years ago. It was bizarre. It was a really strange world to get into, and I'm glad that I don't do that research regularly. But it was rife. It was rife with fraud, and someone was definitely profiting off of it. But the profiting off of the death and the injury of individuals was just horrifying to me.
Yeah. And I think, it's interesting when you think about this, because these people are so, the Koch ideology, it's like so marginal, like not many people at all in this country would subscribe to this kind of hard libertarian worldview that says the only legitimate functions of government are to provide for the national defense, to ensure the rule of law, and to guarantee social order. That means armies, courts, and police. Beyond that, they don't think anybody should be able to go, and nothing else is legitimate for government to do all the kinds of things that we all depend on. But a cause like that would never get anywhere without all this money, right? And then also these ideas that came from James Buchanan, the figure I wrote about in Democracy in Chains, who supplied the ideas that could enable that radical change. So, lots of people have tracked the dark money that the Kochs, have put into American public life, politics, think tanks, etc. But what has made that money so effective is the strategy they're using.
Yes.
And now here, you're going to shoot me, but I just came back from a trip and I realized my battery power is going down. So I know that the cord is on my stairs. Can I jump up? And
Absolutely.
Please, go ahead.
Great.
We might even leave this
and
in.
you all
It's
can
so
talk together and figure out what's next.
So
Okay,
charming.
No problem.
I want to go next.
Okay, high five, because I am like, as you guys know, I've been up all night reading this book, salivating, steam coming out of my ears and screaming. And, I have a litany of stuff, but I can condense it. You go next, high five.
I have a 2-part question for Nancy.
You always have a multiple part question. Always, yeah.
I got so many questions. I got to
Because
squish
he
them
holds his
together.
hand
Hey,
up
where did
to
you
ask
just
a
come back
question.
from,
Yeah, he has
Nancy?
to
I
build it
was,
all up.
in Wilmington, North Carolina, where my sister and her husband live, and I was seeing my nephew, who was back briefly before some travels and going on.
We can cut this out, Nancy.
Yeah.
You don't happen to know Ann Reynolds, do you?
No.
Okay. It's Ann Reynolds from the RJR family in North Carolina. Anyway, she was the one that recommended your book to me when we were discussing some things. But we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, so important. Okay, so we're going to go ahead. I'm going to count everybody back in.
Okay.
3, 2.
So, Nancy, I have a 2-part question for you. One of the things I really noticed as I was reading your book was you talk about trust in government and how for their plan to be effective, they have to erode the trust of the population in government. And the second part of that question, which is it's just separate. Charles Koch was a big follower of Robert Lefebvre. And one of the things we've done is identify that Michael Flynn is a member of loosely the I Am cult, which Robert Lefebvre is also. Did you encounter anything about that? But let's start with the trust and then go to the cult.
Yeah, well, let me start with the cult because, we could come back because he was truly, off the charts. But I did not know about the Flynn, so I would love to see the documentation of that because that's really interesting. Yeah, well, I'll go in reverse.
That guy found it.
So
that guy found it.
Good for you, Jim. Nice work. So yeah, Lefebvre had he created this what was called Freedom University, this kind of libertarian camp, and as somebody wrote, it was catnip for radical businessmen, Charles Koch, who entrepreneurs are the greatest figures in all history. They shouldn't be restrained in any way. There are also apparently some beautiful young women who were hanging around him, even though they were talking this Christian talk and everything. But no, so Charles Koch was a patron. Milton Friedman was there. All these kinds of figures would go to this place that was really, really radical right libertarianism. But to the question about trust in government, that is so crucial. And again, that was a distinctive contribution, if you want to call it that, of James Buchanan, because he had been actually born in rural Tennessee, in a small, little hamlet, not even a town, Gum, Tennessee, to an agricultural family. They were well off by local standards, but nobody in agriculture. Oh, nice. Nobody in agriculture in the South was doing well in the Depression, and he had been born in 1930. And so having lived through that and understood how the New Deal was hugely important to the South. President Roosevelt identified the South as the nation's #1 economic problem. There were all these efforts to help agriculture, to help mining, manufacturing, all all of these industries in the South to provide rural electrification through the Tennessee Valley Authority, all these other things. So Buchanan understood something that none of these Northerners got, who were part of this radical right libertarian cause, which is that you couldn't just go and tell people, hey, the market is really great, and forget everything that corporations did to you that got us to the Great Depression, and everything your boss is doing, and all the pollution that comes from these industries. Forget all of that, and instead just trust us, just trust the market, and don't rely on government. Well, that's not going to work. And Buchanan's, signature, I don't want to call it genius, but it was his understanding from where he had come from that wouldn't do it. And so he actually sold the research agenda and program that he and his colleagues were doing at different universities in Virginia. He moved around because he had such trouble getting along with people that he kept leaving in a huff. But they would sell their agenda as, we're doing something distinctive, which is making people realize that government, like, we shouldn't just talk about market failure, we should talk about government failure. And there's no reason to trust that government can do the things government says it's going to do.
Right.
It's also really important to realize his program the research program was all like, as Germans, there's a German word, I forget what it's called, but head birth, it was all theory. It wasn't empirical work, but it presented itself as a science that was teaching people that, you shouldn't rely on government, people in public, not just government, but anybody in public life is as selfish as any capitalist. And even if they say they're working for, whatever, in the environment or civil rights or labor rights or any of these things. No. They're actually thinking about how they can advance themselves, whether it's personal bottom line or the size of their membership or these other things. So it's a really toxic set of ideas that undermines trust in public life, in one another, and in government. And some people actually predicted that at the time he got the Nobel Prize in 1986, that this a catastrophic set of ideas if widely believed. And lo and behold, fast forward, we have this radicalized Republican Party that has totally jumped the tracks, is no longer for democracy, right? They're against democracy and are manipulating the Constitution. And that comes from these toxic ideas. These toxic ideas have influenced that at every step. So
it seems like such a horribly pessimistic outlook, right? Just the foundation of the premise that this argument is founded on is horribly pessimistic. And it's almost a gross sort of caricature of the zero-sum game, where I get one and you take one away, and it's like it's reading through this. Of course, it's fun. It's amazing work. It's
greatest trick, I think, everybody, that has been played out on America is to make poor people care so profoundly about rich people's taxes. I mean, these are incredible tricks. They're continually told to not have, their own interests at heart, and just to worry about, the poor billionaire who has to pay their taxes. There's an incredible line in your book: if you tell a great lie and repeat it often enough, the people will eventually come to believe it. That's a Goebbels line. The German Nazi propagandist. Today, the big lie of the Koch-sponsored radical right is that society can be split between the makers and the takers. Well, if anybody's friends with a CPA, CPAs will tell you that the makers are often the biggest takers with their government tax breaks. They continually are benefiting from this big government. So, as you note in your book, the Koch network, this cadre, they really don't want small government, but what they want, is basically absolutely no guardrails for capitalism, and for our democracy as we know it to cease to exist.
Yeah, Heidi, that is so important. What was the last thing you just said? I just had a brain freeze. Sorry. Drive back.
Well,
the makers and takers, to your point about the billionaires and the way they manipulate the system, this just came out because the Biden administration, started to propose this alternative minimum tax for billionaires of 20%, when most of the rest of us, and as his administration, now teachers and firefighters are paying 30-some.
That's right.
But the context for that is they are apparently the average rate that American billionaires, the average tax rate they're paying is 8%.
Yeah.
Right. So they
Yeah.
have rigged the tax system and rigged
Yes.
all the rules
Yep.
so much so that, of course, they made money hand over fist
Right.
during the pandemic when everybody else was suffering, because
Right.
they've got it arranged so all the money sort of flows upward to them. Yeah.
That's right.
It shocked me that there was no billionaires in 1956 when this guy
Wasn't that
started
hard? I had to
writing.
look that up,
That
but yeah.
blew me away, because
Yeah.
we are this tyranny of the minority that we're
Mhm.
experiencing right now is and what Jim has pointed out recently, which I think you may have interest in,
Mhm.
is that they've done this to us through stealth. They've
Mhm.
done this covertly, but now it's not so covert anymore. It almost seems like they're doing it brazenly. We just had Nadine Smith from Equality Florida on before you. We're doing a special report on what's happening in Florida. And this network, whether it's CRT or Don't Say Gay or school boards or whatever, they're using everything they can to disrupt the true American narrative with these warring factions that are anti, and othering. And one through line in your book is continually the racism aspect of it. I think that's been weaponized to get us to this precipice that we're on.
It really has. And actually, if you look at, different things, survey, there's tons of like survey data from over the years. And we were actually making significant headway until this cause like went into overdrive when President Obama was elected, and thereafter, and they've been weaponizing everything since. And you really, there's no way that this cause achieves what it has without Fox News, right? And without this whole toxic right-wing media ecosystem. And communication scholars have studied this, that they're literally like it is, as you know, it's not about information. It's not about knowledge. It's about the cultivation of an embattled white tribal identity, particular white Christian tribal identity, the cultivation of that, and then the daily provoking of that, and if you listen to transcripts, I mean, I can't bear to listen. I read the transcripts of a lot of this stuff. When what they did or what Rush Limbaugh did, I mean, they would just talk about like use these outrageous insults and say that's how the rest of us think about their base. And so of course then people aren't going to trust this media that they've been told hates them, despises them, condescends to them, et cetera, et cetera. And so it is really really a challenge. But again, I just think of this too, like in either way, like if you shut off the spigots either to the dark money that the Kochs are allowed to put into our system that is so toxic, or if you unplugged Fox News, right? If you got on either side,
the difference would be amazing.
It would
like
be
overnight.
astonishing because majorities of us agree on policies, on so many policies. People, I think it's like 70. It's off the charts the number of people who think billionaires should be paying more. Off the charts the number of people who think that we should be doing more to support our schools. People want clean air and water. They, so many things we agree on, and they succeed by cultivating nonstop culture war. Provoking that again and again and again. And it's such a battled record at this point, but they've been very successful at it. And as you're pointing out, Heidi, I mean, they've been doing it so much in these last 2 years, and that clearly is their strategy for the 2022 midterms.
That's right.
Is, attacks on trans people, don't say gay, and also, serious, really ugly attacks on any attempt to teach the truth about American history. And about teaching anything about the role of race in our society and history, which is such a disservice to our students. And there again, we get the majority. It's like the majority, I think it's like 70% or so. There's a great coalition called Learn from History that's working on these issues. But their polling suggests that I think it's over 70% of people, like they want their kids to have honest history. They understand that they need to know the world they're entering. And for that, you need, factual accuracy, and you need to deal with things that don't necessarily make you feel good every day. But that's okay, because that's about learning. And then they have the gall, though. Sorry to rant, but
we love it.
Go ahead.
call our like progressive young people snowflakes,
Yeah,
or
right.
that the progressive side is somehow suppressing free speech, which is, so much of what we see is just projection. Like you do these
That's
outrageous
right.
So
things, like
yeah. So I came to your book actually through the Newt Gingrich tapes. And I was curious because I was sort of working backwards and looking at the sort of codification and the solidification of their message, the messaging, the constant messaging, right? Because you would
yeah,
hear, even with, Marjorie Taylor Greene, you would hear the shift from socialism to communism. You would hear somebody must have sent an email out saying, okay, we're not just going to call them socialists, we're going to call them communists,
yeah.
So then working backwards, you hear about these Gingrich tapes, what I didn't realize existed. And I wondered if you, your research into that arena, and I mean, there was obviously think tanks where they went and developed this language, and then every, send out these, they were actual tapes, like audio tapes that he would send out every week or every month to the Republican Party, and then they would all have a unified message.
Yeah.
Down to the insults that they used to call the left wing. They would have a certain set of words, as well as a certain set of words that they would use to describe the positive benefits of the GOP and the right wing. And we've seen these different strategies, different technologies or techniques to use in this way of really sort of tightening their messaging down, where it's sort of a constant drumbeat that they've been hitting for decades now. And your book obviously uncovers it even further. But that was my entry point into this work, which I thought was
interesting. Yeah. And people can actually look that up. I did it recently for a talk. It was like last minute. It's like, oh, I should mention, that Gingrich started this language, this, some people call it exterminationism, like, saying that, and it's not even the left. They said, you should talk about all Democrats, like don't ever use, normal positive language. Instead, call them things like traitors, lazy, corrupt, like really generating a kind of personal hatred components. And so fast forward, that's why so many of these people couldn't accept that Trump lost the election, because they think of the other side as illegitimate. And you can't run a democracy if you think that the other side is so hateful and diabolical that that they could never be let near power. And that was absolutely calculated. And interestingly, that is when Buchanan, that I wrote about, in the book, started his school of thought, began to have real impact, first in the Reagan years, but also they were very proud that Newt Gingrich and Dick Armey and that Republican Revolution were applying their ideas to, change the political culture. So it goes back.
It's the language of dehumanization. It's not just illegitimate, right? It's when you start thinking of people as a category, right? And now they're going all the way into calling liberals a disease, and getting way into the darkest reaches of speaking of Goebbels, of that level of genocidal propaganda. Anyway,
I have two more. I have two more things, but Hi-Fi, you got something you want to ask? Because we only got 3 more minutes, and I want to maximize it. I want to squeeze it
real fast. You talked about Coke and technology, and one of the things I know about Coke and technology is his Themis database, which is wow. Just 30 seconds on that.
Yeah, this is really scary. Look it up. It's called now it's called I360. They changed the name of it, but before it was Themis, THEMIS, and they have something like they've harvested, they've bought up all of this information about people that's available through social media, through purchasing history, through anything else that they can grab, and they have something like, I believe it's like 3,000 data points on like 180 million Americans. And what that has meant for their political operations. And I know people, like in Tennessee and Nashville, they came and swooped in from the outside and totally undermined a very popular public transport initiative. And they were able to do it because the operatives on the ground were equipped with these iPads that were loaded with this system, so that if you talk about manipulation, like if
Yeah.
I want to get you to vote my way, I find whatever data I need and I can use that data to manipulate you. What's really scary, and what I think needs to be pinned on the Republican Party more, is this system is so sophisticated. It's what the Republican Party is now relying on. So they have a privately held database. So anytime Koch decides like the Republican Party is not useful anymore, they could go create a new political party with this database. I mean, it's astonishing. But it's all enabled by the fact, going back to what we said, like we've enabled this billionaire class to develop with so many of these right-wing billionaires who are totally hostile to democratic forms of rule, and they have the capacity to fund these innovations that will bring us down if we don't stop them.
Yes, and real fast, I just want to point out the way that Peter Thiel and Yuri Milner build up social media in Silicon Valley actually really mirrors the moves that Milner's boss Usmanov has made in Russia, specifically with regards to VKontakte, which is basically the Russian Facebook. They are setting up these companies to harvest data to manipulate people. That's something everyone needs to understand.
Yes, that's right. I have two quick notes before we let you go, and we're so grateful that you took time for us today, because your work is very critical to our mission. People who don't know who Buchanan is, he wrote this almost 2 decades ago. People who failed to foresee and save money for their future needs, Buchanan wrote in 2005, are to be treated as subordinate members of the species akin to animals. So just to give you a sense of how that type of thought process is being weaponized and utilized by this stealth and covert, and sometimes not so stealth and covert operation. But in 2015, 2016, the traditional Republican had an opportunity to stand up against this network, and they rolled. And everything is guns, denial of climate change, and exploiting racism. And can you say anything to our viewers about what Pandora's box was opened when their own party refused to stand up against these extremists that are actually attacking all our democratic systems?
Yeah, I think that this is really crucial for all Americans to understand. There is no more Republican Party of the kind that once existed. My dad voted he died in 2000, but he voted for the Republican Party for most of his life. He was kind of an Eisenhower Republican. He hated the culture war stuff, but he had that kind of whatever. There were lots of people like that.
Yes,
and
we know.
Still people, some people like that. And a lot of them I know are scratching their heads, trying to figure out what happened. But the role of elected office holders in the Republican Party and their unwillingness to come out and tell the American people the truth about what they've seen and what has gone on in their party, I think is going to be looked at by future historians with such kind of horror and condemnation, because essentially what the Koch network people are banking on is that none of these Republicans will walk away from their elected office, right? They knowing that they're going to face this buzzsaw of, it's like a pincers, like the donor money on the top and then this aroused Fox News base on the bottom. They will get squeezed if they step out of line, if they admit that climate change exists, if they say we need more taxes to do the things the American people want done. If they cooperate with Democrats in any way, they're out. And that is the dynamic that's created, frankly, nutcases, right? Like Marjorie Taylor Greene in Georgia, Madison Cawthorn in my state, because they've gerrymandered to such a degree that there's no real competition. So you can only be replaced by somebody who is more far out on the right wing spectrum than you. But the terrible, terrible thing is the moral failure is too simple a term for these Republican office holders who would not tell people what was happening. I mean, think of it. Liz Cheney, I don't agree with her on policy, but God bless her for standing up for the Constitution, right? And they're primarying her. They've condemned her through the party. They're going after her. And Adam Kinzinger, the other Republican on the January 6th House Select Committee, isn't even going to try to run because they've made it clear that he'll lose. They'll do everything to fund his opponents. So we have seen the kind of commandeering and destruction and distortion and transformation of one of our major political parties into a delivery vehicle for this radical right corporate agenda, but that relies on culture war, on producing hate and just all the stuff that we see now. They wouldn't win without this. And we really need, there are like the Never Trump Republicans. And I'm on their mailing list. I get some of their stuff, but I don't think any of them have fully come to terms, what happened here, nor have they turned the heat as they should have on other Republicans who have left Congress, like John Boehner, who said that Ted Cruz, he said Ted Cruz was Lucifer in the flesh.
Yes,
that's funny and that's charming, but he's lobbying, he's making a fortune, and he has not told the American people what he really meant by that.
That's
right? What is really going on? So I think
lobbying for the weed industry, which is interesting.
Well, yeah, he's selling weed now.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, but that's a great money laundering vehicle for oligarch friends too. Nancy, what are our marching orders? So what can you? We like to kind of end with our own shock and awe on what to do. Like, what can we shock people into doing so they can be helpful?
Well, I think, all of us have to recognize that this is it. We're like DEFCON 2 on the future of democracy. And some people don't get excited about that word, but think of it this way. Like this, it is what we do together to protect ourselves from huge agglomerations of, say, corporate power, right? So what we need to do going forward, if we have any chance at holding power, is deep structural reform of democracy. The kind of thing that was part of, the effort coming in with the Biden administration that got undermined by Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema. But so we have to teach progressive voters and just normal people, right, to realize that this is a marathon. Every election counts. These midterms in 2022, I don't effing care how tired or cranky you feel, or what, or like as a gas price is high, so you don't feel enthusiasm. Like, this is it, for your children, your grandchildren. If we do not have significant turnout in 2022 to keep them from further rigging the rules to enable a coup in 2024, that could be it. So I think we've got to chew gum and walk and realize we've got to work to keep people engaged, as frustrated as they may be, to keep people engaged with the political process, but also realizing that we need deep structural reform of the kind, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, so many people have made abundantly clear, we know the system is rigged, corporations have power. Sheldon Whitehouse, in Rhode Island is great on the captured courts. So we know what the problem is, but we have to get more and more people to row together so that we can so that we're not depending on just Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema.
And we can do it. We can
if you look at, Lincoln, if you look at FDR, if you look at LBJ, they had huge surplus, votes in Congress when they moved significant agendas. So you could lose some on things, but we have got to get to a point so it's not just 2 votes can sink an agenda that the vast majority wants. So I would just say stick at it, and I do think, because we've talked about how bad things are and how many issues there are, but I also believe that if we do stick with it, this could be a time of transformation, radical reconstruction, like what happened in the New Deal, like what happened in the 60s, because as somebody put it, our corporate overlords, they're crushing us down. But beneath that, there's been incredible change in the society. We have huge resources on the progressive side, people, organizations, cultural talents, podcasters like y'all. There's so much going on, but we have to break through this crust, and have stamina to keep going, to get to the point that we need to bring in the world that we all need, right? A world that's stable for young people, that fixes the climate, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you so much for this incredible interview. Fantastic. Yes, hi.
I just want to bring up one thing. You talk about FDR and the New Deal and how much Buchanan hated it. And as we have come to learn, there was a fellow named Smedley Butler who stepped up and stopped the business plot, right?
Yeah.
Kind of feels to me like we're at the same point in time again. There's all these billionaires trying to just destroy democracy.
But we got people power, man, and we saw it. We saw it in 2020. We saw it in 2020. We did what no country has ever been able to do. We stopped an authoritarian in the middle of authoritarian capture. We kicked out a bunk leader, and 2022, we can do this again. We can do it.
Right.
I feel it.
On that note, that is great.
I feel inspired
to be with you all and your audience.
Thank you so much, Nancy.
Much.
Honored to have you here.
Oh my gosh. I told her that our audience buys books. So I'm holding our viewers to it. Buy Democracy in Chains. Stay up all night. Get mad like I did. Yell through the rooftop and then take action, because that's what this is about. This is about taking action. So, wow, we just had Nancy MacLean on, guys.
She's fantastic.
How cool is that?
How cool is that? How cool is that?
She's amazing. She's a firecracker,
podcasters like us.
Oh.
Podcasters like us. Come on now. Come on now. You know what I'm saying? Hey,
podcasters like us can't keep up with a person like Nancy. She was 1,000 miles a minute. It was amazing.
She's amazing. She's
incredible.
Amazing. Oh my gosh. Wow, you guys. Thank you for a really incredibly brilliant episode. Everybody be on the lookout for our breaking news special presentation with Nadine Smith. And do we have a digital dissent?
We do, and it's just referencing the 14.3 challenge to Marjorie Taylor Greene. So this is there's some bits of information here that I think is
I'm already laughing.
Pertinent and valuable. So we'll take a look.
I'd like to just take a minute to remind everyone that words matter and their meanings need to be exactly clear.
If we shut down the streets, if we shut down everything, if we flood the Capitol building, flood all the government buildings, go inside.
Words matter.
We're working very hard to raise a grassroots army.
And their meanings need to be exactly clear.
I am here to represent every single one of you.
Just take a minute to remind everyone that the responsibility falls squarely on those that invaded the Capitol.
Are you guys ready?
Words matter.
Let's march to the Supreme Court.
And their meanings
Stop the steal.
Need to be exactly clear.
Stop the steal.
I'd like to remind everyone that the responsibility falls squarely on those
Just finished with our meeting.
that planned it ahead of time.
Had a great planning session. We're working to raise a grassroots army.
Words matter. The responsibility falls squarely on those that invaded the Capitol.
Go inside. We aren't going to let this election be stolen.
The ones that planned it ahead of time.
StopTheBidenSeal.com is where you can sign up, because this is only beginning.
You don't have to read. You don't have to know anything.
Wow. I'm going to tell you one thing before we
Well,
cut
there
out
you
here.
go.
If Nancy MacLean is right, and we do not do our job and turn out the vote like our democracy depends on it, we're going to get worse than her in the future. I don't want to see that kind of future.
She's just the clown to break the ice. She's like the clownish warm-up act.
And
wait till the real guys get in there, the real bad ones.
It's not too hidden. It's not too hidden, guys. I mean, if you want to see someone that has been involved in the planning and the helping of a rebellion and insurrection, I mean, she said it all.
That's right.
There's a several dozen people in Congress who knew all about it ahead of time.
That's right. So thanks, guys. We'll see you soon. And this will be up tomorrow morning, Monday morning at 8 a.m.
Beautiful show. Thank you, everybody. You guys rule.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your hard work.
You guys soon. Bye.